My name is Keith Marzullo, and I'm the Dean of the College of Information. Good afternoon. We're so happy to see you here. This is the annual ALA Lecture Series. This series is a partnership between the American Library Association and the College of Information. We've been doing this since 2021. We actually tried to do it a little earlier, but this thing called COVID got in the way. And so we started in 2021. This is an annual lecture, talk, or discussion aimed at engaging the library and information science community and increasing awareness of legislative, policy, and advocacy issues in LIS. Following this tradition, this year's Fireside Chat, or at least side-by-side chat, will address the policy issues of the day, and there are many of them, with some questions created by our team and some submitted by the audience members ahead of time. I'd like to thank the programming team, led by our MLIS co-directors, Ryan O'Grady and Amelia Gibson. Thank you very much. And in Where at ALA, thank you, Ian. And without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speakers. Sam Helmick is the president-elect of the American Library Association. They currently serve as Community Access and Access Service Coordinator at Iowa City Public Library. Helmick was a member of the ALA Executive Board until 2024 and is the past president of the Iowa Library Association. They previously served as former chair-elect on the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable and chair of the Iowa Governor's Commission of Libraries. They have served on committees for the Network of the National Library Medicine, the Stonewall Book Award, the L. Prince Committee, the Reference and User Service Association, Sophie Brody Award Committee, and the YALSA Fundraising Task Force. Helmick is a 2016 emerging leader, as well as an author, consultant, and instructor for social media marketing and graphic design. They hold a Bachelor of Science in Human Services from Iowa Wesleyan University and a Master of Science in Library and Information Science from the University of Illinois. Let's welcome Sam. Our moderator for tonight is our good friend of the college, Joe Thompson. Joseph Thompson, we'll plot him again. We'll plot them both again. Joseph Thompson is the Director of Public Services by the Carroll County Public Library in Maryland. He is immediate past chair of the American Library Association's Committee on Legislation and currently serves as Maryland's chapter counselor on the ALA Council. His past professional experience includes serving as president of the Maryland Library Association and president of the Reference and User Service Association. He received his MLIS in 2001 from the number 3 ranked MLIS program in the nation, the University of Maryland. UIUC is number 1, but we're not going to talk about that. Please join me in welcoming Sam and Joe.
Testing, it works. Thank you all so much for being here this afternoon, evening. It's wonderful to be back at College Park. I'm looking forward to coming back in about 9 days for Maryland Day on campus. So looking forward to that. Sam, it is so good to see you here. Thank you for being here. I know a lot of mechanizations played out to get you here today. So I appreciate you being here and being able to have this conversation with you.
The weather helps. I really appreciate the weather out there. That helped a lot. I just left 32 degrees in Iowa, but to be in community with you all today is a special treat. So I thank you so much for that community tonight. I expect that I will be learning more than I impart, which is sort of the goal I always have in mind for these things.
Great. Well, thank you, Sam. So we have some prepared questions. We also have received questions from attendees, so we'll sort of intersperse those throughout the larger conversation. So thank you all that did contribute questions to this event. So first, let's get started. As was noted, you are a past president of the Iowa Library Association. I'm a past president of the Maryland Library Association. So I think it's easy to say that we're both very passionate about supporting our local chapters. I expect we've got folks online who are members of the Virginia Library Association, the DC Library Association, and maybe some Iowa Library Association folks as well, including Maryland Library Association too. So I'm wondering what led you to get involved in your state association, and then maybe what next steps took you to get involved in ALA?
That's a great question. It's a little rambly if I can tell a short story. I wasn't a library supporter as a child or a young adult. The teen section had like R.L. Stein's Fear Street. Does everybody remember Fear Street? And some Just 14 magazines, and they'd always side-eye me if I tried to get to the second floor for the adult section. And so by the time that they were trying to pass around a petition to put a levy for a new special shiny library on the ballot in my community, I'm like, no way. But you know, they built it, and it was wonderful and glorious, and by the time I was an undergrad, I needed to volunteer for a graduate requirement and had absolutely no chill and volunteered at this library. And do you all have summer reading program here in Maryland? It was the Catch the Reading Bug the year I volunteered, and a little person in the lobby came up to me and said, Miss Sam, if you hold the tarantula at this petting zoo we had, I will pet him. The Iowa State Extension Office from their university has an insect zoo that they let us borrow. What was really cool about this moment was I had this kid on two technicalities. The first is I don't do tarantulas, and technically tarantulas are arachnids, not insects. But what was beautiful about that moment is they were completely different age and social background and race than me, and in a lobby of a public library, we could come together and have a transformative experience together in face of fear, and I thought, okay, I get it now, and I love libraries. And so I became enthusiastic about this field and joining positions of leadership because I knew if I could do a 180, I was a living example of what could happen around the country if folks understood that libraries transform lives every single day. And I have hardly shut up about it since. So I became a library worker at that library, went to graduate school, joined the Commission of Libraries because I understood the power structure meant that Iowa, that has more public libraries per capita than any other in the nation, needed a state library to support its rulers and smalls, and I wanted to understand what that was about and to tell their stories. And then I became an emerging leader and the chapter counselor and then the chapter president, and I ran for executive board and they let me in, and we've been working through, I would say, an unprecedented and historical wave of anti-library legislation that is pernicious to our community, so these stories continue to come up and float into importance, and it's been an absolute delight to continue to gather them for 15 years. Libraries are powerful because you can not vote for a levy, and then 12 years later you can be one of the faces of the profession. I think that's pretty incredible. Did that answer your question?
It did honor my question, thank you. I do hope you're voting in favor of those levies now.
I actually had to fight for all 97 of them. A lot of egg on my face when I was ILA president, and I had to go up to Des Moines quite often and explain to them the power of them. And so, yeah, I fight really hard for them now.
And Sam, could you also talk about what led you to get involved in considering actually running for president of the American Library Association? What led to that decision?
Oh, well, I think serving on council and understanding the structure really served me well for executive board leadership, and then serving with that body and getting to know the ALA staff better and recognizing that we were at this pivot point as a profession, because we are fighting a very important cultural war and having very meaningful and necessary discussions. But my background in a red state suggests to me that we're fighting a cultural war as well, and that sometimes takes a back seat. And I wanted to really bring that to the foray because as a professional network, ALA has really helped me find community and develop skill sets as a 21st century thought partner for our communities. But I'm finding increasingly that our professional networks now have to also serve as advocacy firewalls between those we serve, our library communities, and pernicious legislation and executive orders. And so because of my experience in Iowa, because of my experience at the state library, I felt I wanted to add that voice. I honestly didn't think I had a great chance of winning, but I knew that that platform would let me tell that piece of the library story that was really important to get in front of membership and practitioners.
Thank you, Sam. So we are here hosted tonight by the College of Information at University of Maryland. So I do want to ask the question, when you think back to your own experience getting your Master's of Library Science, Master's of Library and Information Science, what do you wish you would have known at that time that you didn't know?
I'm so glad that we're assuming I've learned things in this. Illinois was absolutely wonderful. I was a practitioner at the same time, so it was sort of incredible to talk about philosophy, theory, application, and then get to go back to the Burlington Public Library as a then teen librarian and put it right to work the same day. What I really wish, though, knowing where I'm at in this place in the journey, knowing where we're all at historically, is that we do not solve library problems in a vacuum. Libraries are reflections of the communities they serve, and it is required of the communities to step up and show up for those libraries in order for them to thrive. And I think that a lot of us are a stay humble, hustle hard sort of profession. And what I really wish I'd understood is the power of power mapping, the power of networking, the power of engaging, organizing, but then activating the communities that I serve in order for them to speak up and speak out for libraries. Because that is always going to be part and parcel to this work to keep us relevant, engaged, robustly resourced.
And what advice would you have for students who are interested in librarianship, who are interested in perhaps getting involved in ALA, especially at this pivotal time in our country's history?
So I would really suggest that you look at the new members roundtable. That is a really great entry point. You have a lot of wonderful mentors and mentorship opportunities through that avenue. But then emerging leaders was where I found some of my first hardcore lifelong library colleagues and friends from across the country. Coming from a small town of like less than 15,000 in Southeast Iowa, and then having like a cadre of friends that spanned the United States, but also the globe was very powerful, and teaching and informing my perspective on the field and on the practice of librarianship. But then I also think it's important that when you look at outside opportunities for like internships or initial jobs, that you think about the intersectionality of what libraries do in government, what libraries do in social services, what libraries are doing in K-12 education and academic education, and see if you can really find something that really feeds your soul and feeds your goals and your values so that you'll follow it and pursue it with alacrity. And then you can kind of use that as a touchstone wherever else you go. So my background in sociology, psychology, and criminal justice has served me very well as a public services librarian, but more specifically, like my background with like the Aldo Leopold Sustainability Heritage Group has also served me, because again, libraries are sort of like these community anchor institutes that touch everybody. So I think I would really focus on what can I do outside of the brick and mortar institution as well as inside the brick and mortar institution to support myself as a young professional, thinking about what my next professional step will be.
I greatly respect that advice about getting involved in those local community organizations. I know a lot of people who have found value in that, and it's really helped them build those connections and networks and in advance. So yeah, really appreciate that. You mentioned the new members roundtable. ALA has many roundtables. Of course, we're familiar with a lot of the divisions as well. I'm an active member of RUSA and the Reference and User Services Association and the Public Library Association. I'm interested to know about your experience in divisions and roundtables. I know that you've been a member leader in YALSA, the Young Adult Services Association, ALA's Rainbow Roundtable. Can you talk about how these communities have shaped you as a librarian and a leader in the profession?
What I loved about each of them is that they always incorporated professionals from completely different backgrounds and perspectives. And so what it taught me to do was not only work with like 5 different time zones asynchronously, which around March of 2020 became very handy, but it also taught me that there was so much more to the world of librarianship than I ever could have dreamed. It made me recognize that while I knew I was going to stay home for like personal reasons and elder care, that librarianship could actually bloom wherever it was planted in a community or a state if you really pulled in those national resources from the American Library Association. So being able to bring in things like live watches of the Youth Media Awards to my community library, and being able to like talk to my teens about the advanced reader copies when I served on Prince was really edifying and joyful. But then also getting to be like my full authentic self and come out professionally before I came out personally on the Rainbow Roundtable, and then being able to support and edify scholarship and book awards and contribute to an author's change of life moment when they got that award was just, it still was super beautiful. I think my favorite ALA conference, and it might still be even after this one when I'm inaugurated, was when the Marriage Equality Act was passed and ALA was in San Francisco and I was on the Stonewall Book Awards. I'm like, I think that's like after school special wonderful, you know? I don't think it gets better than that. And so I think about how often this professional network has brought me personal joys as well as professional joys. And that's helped me with work-life balance, but B, vocational awe, because I do actually have a conduit to step back and be myself within my peer space, and then we also have an opportunity to work on something meaningful together. Did that answer your question, Joe?
Thank you. Appreciate it, Sam. So we're going to talk a little bit here about library advocacy, which is at the forefront of many of our minds right now. So the ALA president and the president-elect both do a ton of work to really help create a common message around advocacy for those of us who work in the profession and the association. Can you talk about how you address frustrations that some might perceive as the organizations struggle to really meet the needs of this moment, this very, I keep describing it as a moment we've never seen before. It's unprecedented in so many ways. So can you talk about how advocacy works for you and how you help bring that advocacy message together?
Thanks for leading an easy one with me here. Yeah, I think that this is like 10,000 feet and then 5,000 feet and then in the valley together. And I hope you don't mind if I start there and then just parachute down. I think we're all frustrated, and I think we're frustrated because, of course, our national association is going to reflect what we're seeing in our own institutions. We have become the catch-all for all of society's needs without any additional training or resources. And then it's not enough to do this wonderful, needful work without any more resources. Now we also have the second full-time job of advocating for the right to do it, right? Without really activating our communities that we serve to help us amplify that voice, which is much more meaningful. So I actually feel and empathize and understand those feelings because it means that our professional association reflects what's happening in our libraries everywhere. And what I really like about having this resource, this wonderful resource called American Library Association, is that we are stronger together, and I can kind of learn what everybody else is going through. I can empathize, but I think it also strengthens my perspective wherever I'm working or trying to serve in the field and through advocacy. So I really appreciated the fact that after 149 years, we still have this wonderful network of training and socializing and skill building, but that we're now increasingly becoming the firewall between the pernicious executive orders and the pernicious legislation against our patrons and library communities and those that are penning them. And so what I've really loved about the work of ALA is a couple of things. The Public Policy and Advocacy Office and the Chapter Relations Office have been working with chapter presidents and chapter leaders for years to talk about, hey, ALA pernicious, but more specifically intellectual freedom and library adverse, legislation is coming, and here are the tools that we can give you to show the value of your libraries in your state. But then additionally, I think the work that we're doing now, both overtly and subvertly, is really monumental, and I would say probably hasn't occurred since 2001's Patriot Act, because we haven't quite been here since then. I hope that honors your question, but I want to add something else to it. I'm really excited about the public-facing support that the association can now absorb for our libraries. Kind of like you get your tote bag and you can donate to ALA and you can help the cause, because Americans have been asking how to do that for a very long time, and that just launched about 2 months ago. So now everybody can get into the game, and both of my parents have tote bags now, and I don't know if they wanted them, but they got them. And then the last piece of this is we're helping our general public get the tools that they need to amplify their own voices and their own stories to their own representatives on behalf of libraries, which is essential. When I think about the Intellectual Freedom Summit we hosted at the Library of Congress in September, I was just kind of awed, because the power of ALA is that it can bring people together in a large scale, largest scale that we've ever seen in the United States, on matters of intellectual freedom, book banning, and pernicious legislation that defunds libraries. And so I really appreciate that that's trickled down, and the skills are now coming to the chapters in the local communities.
And I really appreciate what you said about working together too, because that's what I've seen play out for all my years of being involved in ALA, is that the president, the vice president, the officers of the association are working as part of a much larger team. And I take every moment I can to give a shout out to the staff at ALA, especially the staff of the Public Policy and Advocacy Office, the Office for Intellectual Freedom. They're doing the hard work of making sure that we're communicating out a common message and making sure that the presidents are informed, and really we're helping back each other up. And yeah, no, but I think, yeah, it's great that we have these experts who we can rely on to do the research, do the hard work to make sure that we're informed advocates across every level of the library community.
I just want to amplify what you say and echo it, and just recognize too that like the infrastructure they've built is monumental. 2 years ago when I was the Iowa Library Association president and they tried to eliminate all codified funding for libraries, I didn't sleep that spring, but I also didn't have to build one-click digital that had like 156,000 signatures over the weekend saying, leave our libraries alone. And if it was just me and my social media account in Iowa, I'm not sure that libraries would still stand in the state today. So I really thank ALA for making that possible, because you can stay humble, hustle hard, you can not sleep the entire spring and legislative session and be biting your nails and watching the funnels unfold. But unless you have that infrastructure, there's really hardly a way to activate your communities. So I think that that's important to bring up and remind folks they can reach out to the PPA office on any form of legislation and they can tailor messages for you.
Now, of course, the issue at the forefront of a lot of our minds is IMLS. We've seen the very drastic cuts to IMLS, to the funding, the outright work to eliminate IMLS, and the Institute of Museum and Library Services. I always get it wrong, but I'm correcting myself. Institute of Museum and Library Services, and other programs at the federal level. Many faculty at institutions, many folks at various state library agencies have received orders that their federal grants have been eliminated even during the current fiscal year. So it's money that's already been expended for programs, for projects, and now they're being told that there's no funding and those projects are not going to be reimbursed, which is unprecedented. How is ALA responding to these actions at the federal level, and what steps would you like to see from universities and academic libraries specifically? But if you want to broaden that to talk about how other institutions can respond to. Thank you. Sorry, it's a long question.
No, it's a very pertinent question. I really appreciate it. So it's boggling, right, to have actually increased IMLS dollars when they were scheduled to be $0 the entire first Trump administration. And so I thought, okay, we're probably just going to have to fight for our dollars. Maybe we'll get another bump again. And so it was really demoralizing to have this executive order go through. And so what I find fascinating, what I'm trying to learn right now, is what's going to influence Congress to claim their power. And what I've really appreciated about the American Library Association is both their overt and their subvert work to be in community and partnership with folks who are directly related to it at a state and federal level. So I'm just delighted to know that I'm not even sure if 21 AGs have ever countered, like, has there ever been a class action suit with 21 AGs before? Yeah.
I know that.
You don't know that? I find that very fascinating. It has been. And the fact that we're doing this about libraries and that they really find this important is just incredible to me. And so I know they've been leaning into the work of the American Library Association to become acknowledged and informed as they do that work. But I also have really appreciated that at the same time as state librarians who have not gotten that letter yet reach out to member leaders from the American Library Association and vice versa, we can kind of turn to PPA and ALA staff and just say, hey, what are you hearing? What can we talk about to ensure them that this is being focused on and that we're here to support? And the infrastructure was already there. Again, one-click politics is absolutely essential to galvanizing your communities, but that storytelling element that we've added in is precisely what members of Congress have been asking us for in the last 4 weeks. So the fact that we've been gathering stories for over a year and a half is really going to work out well for us now as we try to enter this fight and reclaim and bring back the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Did I get it?
I think so.
All right, awesome. I'm nervous now that I'm going to do it. But then, additionally, the work that we've been doing with ASME, I think is twofold important for me as a former ASME member before I joined management. My father was an ASME steward, and I was actually being groomed to be the ASME president of my small Iowa town. And what I really like to acknowledge in this moment is that this is not only legislation I mean, this is not only a policy action and a litigative action that supports libraries, but it acknowledges that we are library workers, that we work and that we need the tools and resources and rights in order to accomplish that. I just really appreciate that we have this moment to partner with folks and to recognize the human capital, the most important resource in a library every day. It's library workers. And then additionally, there are things happening behind the scene that wouldn't be pertinent or appropriate to talk about, but just even the rumblings I get as like a figurehead of this association is very useful. This is a member-driven association that works in tandem with professional staff and a committee on legislation, and we lean into each other's knowledge and expertise, and it's been really humbling for me to recognize that there's a sea of things that I absolutely do not know, but it is not solely my job or your job or the small library down the street's job or a couple towns over's job to solve this. We have to solve this together. And one of the easiest ways to accomplish that is by sharing the stories of impact. So academic libraries, I want you to know that the Public Policy Awareness Office is going to be asking you all for your stories and the impact of what's going to happen if this funding doesn't come through for you. We have a lot of public library stories, but K through 12 and academic stories are very important to add context and knowledge and recognize how communities really thrive because of the universities that they surround, and that this will hurt them directly. So when I'm in a public library space, I can say for every dollar that we put into an American library, we get a $5 to $9 return on investment. But I need those stories of impact and negativity and harm that are happening because of this for you right now. Additionally, it really gives me some impact when I go to like my exclusively supermajority state that didn't get a letter and let them know that there's not human capital right now in DC to process these funds. So even if a letter doesn't come for us, our Iowa taxpayer is going to be hooked with this bill because the contract didn't end on April 1st. And so I really appreciate the stories that you'll be bringing because I think it's going to take multiple angles of conversation and value and common ground seeking for us to have these conversations throughout the political spectrum.
Thank you. No, fantastic. So I'm going to ask two of the questions that came in from attendees that tie in with this question. Someone asked, how do we create a library budget in these uncertain financial times? Any advice?
Yeah. You do it with your community because let's face it, we are always trying to do same with same or same with less or more with less. And it's a death by 1,000 cuts. It's not sustainable and we can't do it. Eventually too, if it's not felt by your community, they're not gonna understand what's fully happening and they won't be as incentivized to make themselves aware and to step up and show up for libraries. I know that's the last thing we want to do. I know that we would like to internally absorb all of those things. When I became a manager at the Burlington Public Library, 6 months later, we lost 20% of our budget overnight. We literally worked in the dark. We absorbed a management position and we did everything we could to internally support that cut. The budget is still the same 12 years later. That's great in some lights, that's pretty terrible in others. And so I can look back in history, hindsight, an armchair quarterback that and say, well, was that the right decision to make? And I'll be frank with you, it wasn't the right decision to make. We should have been having this conversation with our community. We should have been asking questions and focus grouping like we do with strategic plans and saying, here's the binary that we're looking at with a 20% budget cut. We're gonna have to lose weekends, or we're gonna because we have to lose 3 staff, or we're gonna have to lose programming, or we're gonna have to find an exclusively external resource for all of our programs. So essentially you have the communities not only come in and understand what's at stake, they remind you what they specifically value and need from you as a practitioner, but then they can also help you brainstorm solutions and other funding and resource opportunities while you try to get through the crucible.
And then what advice do you have for friends of the library and broadly library supporters? How can they help advocate to protect these federal funds?
So I'm always joking about bake sales because I've never met a cookie I didn't like and didn't eat. It doesn't even have to be my own cookie, Joe. But no, I don't think we need to diversify. I think what they're doing with sales and programming and fundraising is absolutely awesome. What they have an opportunity to do for us that we as practitioners really can't do for ourselves a lot sometimes, but also we are perceived as self-serving when we do it, is to make the community aware, to share resources like Show Up for Libraries, to make sure that their community understands how many door counts they have per hour and how many circs they have per year, and some of those powerful stories and statistics, so that these conversations are front of mind during, you know, petitions that are being surfaced around for a library levy that other people just don't fully appreciate because that information isn't out there. I think that using their voice is a little bit safer at legislative hearings and committee hearings, so kind of rallying folks who can speak on behalf of their libraries is powerful, because it's one thing for a 9-to-5 person to go up and talk to about their library in Washington, D.C. or Des Moines or Baltimore or wherever. It's another thing when it's like, I'm retired and I give 13 hours a week to this place and I want you to protect it. That's very powerful.
It's incredibly powerful to see people that use the library, that have benefited a lot from the library, who have had some amazing life change as a result of their experience in the library. And I've seen this many cases too, of someone who they started a business, they prototyped something in the makerspace, and then they actually go and testify in committee in Annapolis or the state capitol. And that has a lot of meaning. Someone who's actually had that powerful experience based on the library, or a mom who brings their kids to story time every week, and they've seen the progress that their kids have made based on the skills that they've learned as, or learning those early literacy skills. It's so powerful. You mentioned Show Up for Libraries, and I just want to amplify that piece. That's the current initiative that ALA has fairly recently launched within the past month or so. So if you are looking for an opportunity to look for language that you can use to contact your elected officials in Washington, if you search on the ALA website for Show Up for Libraries, there's probably a banner ad right there on the front page. Go there and you will have access to lots of resources. It's so easy. I just can't emphasize how easy it is to contact your members of Congress. You just go in there and you can either make a phone call. I would actually recommend making a phone call. It has more power than sending an email, but if you're more comfortable sending an email, send that email. There's a pre-scripted message, and you can tweak it to meet your own interests, your own needs, how the library has affected you, and then you can send that off. And it really makes a difference for your members of Congress to hear directly from you as a supporter, as a user of your library. It really, if they can be getting 40, 50 messages a day that are focused on libraries, that's extremely powerful. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to build on that. Show Up for Libraries. Please look for that. Something else that has been capturing a lot of our attention, especially over the last several years, is censorship. So at the local level, many of us have been concerned about the rise in censorship in especially school and public libraries, and now we're seeing some of it in higher education as well. We've seen laws banning participation in the American Library Association and challenges to ALA accreditation in some states. Can you speak to ALA's strategy for responding to these state level actions, and what message would you have to give faculty and staff in light of these attacks?
Yeah, definitely. So when I became a chapter counselor in, 2017, I was also appointed to be the chair of the Iowa Library Association's Freedom Committee, Intellectual Freedom Committee, and I was told by the then president, who will remain nameless just to protect his, reputation, Mike Wright, that I would never have to worry about book bans. And then I went to ALA Midwinter in Denver, and I was learning all about council, and I get this text that there was a minister burning LGBTQIA books from Orange City, Iowa Library on Facebook Live. And I'm like, Mike, we're gonna have some speaks when I get back from Colorado. And what it was for me was this incredible deep dive into a world that I vaguely had referenced during my graduate years, and that I occasionally had to contend with when we had stolen copies of Crank out of the teen section. I kept buying more of them because, not to brag, but Iowa is the meth capital of the world, and so we need third-person narratives to support our families and our communities to understand the pain and sorrow and struggle that comes with that. But beyond that, I'd never actually experienced book burning. And that was the moment that I alighted myself to the Office for Intellectual Freedom and became really good pals with Deborah Caldwell-Stone's inbox, and recognized that there were a lot of tools already at our disposal and that they don't actually check membership at the door. they're there for everybody and they make time for everyone. But as things continued to culminate, and again, I think that a class war was sort of kind of camouflaged through a culture war, both of which are very important to be part of a participating member of and using your voice towards. We recognized that we needed to build a coalition because the Moms for Liberty have a playbook and it's out in front of everyone and it doesn't seem to be slowing them down. And what's really wonderful about the work of the Office for Intellectual Freedom is it's going to give you the precision to help you understand the difference between a challenge and a book ban and censorship and the chilling effect. It's going to help you remember that yeah, the modern day form of book burning is probably the deletion of websites, and we need to think about the modern context of what's happening with censorship. And then they're definitely there to give you privacy tools and teach you how to instruct on privacy to the general public, because you can't have intellectual freedom without privacy. But a lot of that was describing the waters. We really needed to start building rafts. So I'm really proud of the work of Unite Against Book Bans, which built the largest North American coalition, maybe the largest global coalition for free people reading freely. And they do a lot of work in tandem and support each other. And we have a lot of events in national libraries popping up here and there, but with also our publishers and our authors and our lawyers. And it's really useful to have everybody feeling the pulse of their own communities to be able to tell us what's going on in these spheres, ongoing and ongoing and ongoing, but also to amplify, champion, and support each other now with the loss of the Institute of Museum and Library Services and trying to fight to have it reestablished. And I really have enjoyed the work that the chapter relations office have done. So if you're really curious about what you can do with work on the ground and how you can organize and activate your own local communities, I would reach out to them about their advocacy workshop that they've had about 3 years in a row. There are some really wonderful playbooks that they've developed that they can share with you that are really useful for you if you're trying to build like a freedom to read chapter in your own community, or if you're really just curious about what tools and resources the State Library Association has been given. I would apply yourself to that. Michael Dowling is their director, and he even takes calls when I'm on the bookmobile. He's a really cool guy.
Thank you. I'm going to ask 2 questions that came in from participants as well that sort of build on some of these themes. Can you talk about how ALA is collaborating with other organizations, including non-library organizations, perhaps coalitions, to advocate, and here the question specifically about for federal librarians and making sure that we have continued access to data and resources?
So I think that the work that the Office for Intellectual Freedom had been doing for decades really helped us build those relationships, because despite the fact that I hadn't really contended with censorship or book challenges or book burning until 2017, and it felt very personal because I'd been a chapter counselor for like 5 minutes, it's been going on our entire lives. It's been going on since the onset of print. Right? And we've had these wonderful lists every year that kind of help us focus on some trends and some tracking so that we could really kind of, if we were paying attention, see where this was kind of going. And so building those relationships have enabled us to work directly with publishers, but also vendors. Overdrive does a really good service called Book Resumes that is available through Unite Against Book Bans. And what I really love about it is that it gives you a very knowledgeable and I think efficient background on books that may be popular for challenging, so that you can, if you've never read the book before, or if you have a caregiver or a parent or a teacher librarian that might express some concerns, it's a really quick reference for us that they've made available. Obviously, in Iowa, we have the 5 largest publishers suing the governor for Senate File 496. It got kicked up to the 5th Circuit, and now it's back down with an injunction, so books stay on Iowa's library shelves today. And my state chapter had no idea where to start, and if we hadn't worked through ALA to talk to them about what does this look like and who could you connect us with, it never would have been achieved. But I was hoping that as the immediate past chair of the Committee on Legislation, you might talk to us a little bit about other partners that I might not be aware of. Is that okay, Joe? Sure. Thank you.
Sure. No, I think one of the things that was a learning experience for me in my 2 years as chair of the Committee on Legislation was learning about all of the coalitions that ALA participates in, which I didn't know about, honestly, and I think probably most of our members this is probably not on most of their radar either. But of course, ALA, we have expert staff who have their specializations, who are very good at focusing on specific topics, but we can't be experts on everything. We just don't have the capacity. So it's great that ALA can participate in these larger coalitions, and I think the page is still up on the ALA website that lists some of the coalitions that ALA is a part of around various topics, around copyright, a very complicated, complex topic. ALA, we've got smart people, again, on staff, but may not have that depth of knowledge, so we can participate in a coalition where there are experts who can focus on what kind of efforts need to be taken in the legislative sphere, in judiciary, so filing complaints in the courts, and there's been a lot of success through those efforts. I do want to make sure that all of you are aware that ALA does participate in those kind of coalitions, and that can have a lot of impact where ALA staff just don't have that knowledge or capacity.
Right, and a little windy here, but I think it's useful to recognize that ALA too is the umbrella to Public Library Association, Youth Services Library Association, ACRL, and so the work that they're doing with their partners is really the work they're doing with ALA and the staff to support them, and it's hyper-focusing on those specific parts of our discipline, which is really, really useful. But then we also have relationships internationally. It was really humbling to go to Brisbane a couple months ago and be introduced as the president-elect of ALA and have this like awe come over the room. And I knew what it was for, and I'm trying to say it without tearing up, but I did tear up at the time. It wasn't because of me, it wasn't because of my position, it's because I represent you and what you do and what it means. I'm now having conversations in Europe all the time about increasing amounts of book bans because what they're seeing signaled in our country. I imagine you all have heard the phrase, when America sneezes, Europe gets a cold. What we do is champion and hold the standard that free people read freely internationally, and we're all being watched right now. And so I think about the importance of our international relationships and coalitions too. And I'm going to just take this opportunity without crying to say thank you for letting me represent you, because you are the best of so many of us. You bring opportunity and information to people every single day. And by fighting for folks to be able to do that without being judged or scrutinized or embarrassed, to be able to do that with privacy and equity is quite powerful, and it holds meaning outside of the United States.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for getting on the soapbox.
This is the time to do it. So there's a question here that mentions another association that's sort of adjacent to library work. I'm not going to mention them because I don't want to call out anybody, but what the person asking the question says is that they're disappointed in how this other organization has responded, given that it feels like we've had at least a few months to ramp up to the time of this current administration. The current administration, the playbook has been out there. How do you explain ALA's culture of advocacy and how much it is tied to the size of the organization and the capacity of the staff to address these efforts? We sort of hinted around this already.
We did hint around it, but I'm going to use an anecdote. So I moved from a tiny little town to Iowa City, which is the UNESCO City of Literature. It has the largest circulating collection in the state. It has more programs than Des Moines, despite it having no branches. So we're busy, and it's a large infrastructure. And what was frustrating for me when I first started there was that slow is steady and steady is fast. When you have a larger infrastructure, when your institution is actually like tied to 15 million other things in the community that makes them go and work, when you have multiple divisions, everything from United for Libraries for our friends of the libraries to the American Association for School Librarians, there's a lot of work being done, and there's a lot of infrastructure that has to kind of move in tandem if we're all going to have one united voice, which is kind of essential for advocacy work. So it's slow is steady and steady is fast, which can be frustrating sometimes, but then I don't know about you, I feel like we've been very busy and very impactful in the last couple of days and weeks because we had set up all of these things into motion and everybody moved in the same direction. But the other thing is that, maybe I just lost the point halfway, but I think I can get there. So slow is steady and steady is fast, but I think sometimes too, we're doing so much work both behind the scenes and in front of folks that folks have to hear something 7 or 8 times before it gets through. And so I'm sometimes curious if if ALA is showing up, but we're so used to all of the wonderful messages that they're saying that we very rarely have this like DEF CON 4 IMLS kind of afternoon where everybody suddenly is talking about showing up and it feels more uniform. Because what is strong about this association is our diversity. And you may not know what's going on with the Rainbow Roundtable because you're not a member, and you may not be a Spectrum Scholar, but you're kind of vaguely aware that it's this wonderful opportunity and institute that lies within the association. Or you may not absolutely know that there's a gaming roundtable, but I'm telling you right now, you should be a member. It's really cool. And so I think this is one of those moments where we get to actually use 50,000 voices to say the same message, and so it feels rare because we're so large and we typically have a more diverse voice than that.
Yeah, I would add one more element to that, and you mentioned about membership. Your membership matters. Your membership very much matters, and I know sometimes we can get frustrated that our association or various other organizations that we're a part of isn't focused on the issue that's most important to us. But whenever I pay my own ALA membership or membership of Maryland Library Association, whatever the group is, I'm not thinking only about what I'm getting in the immediate sense. Like, the discounts on going to trainings are important for the conference, but I also know that my membership is going towards paying these expert staff to do this really hard work so that we can advance the larger mission of libraries and advance our values as libraries, which I don't have the time to be able to do on my own. And even all these other volunteers who are experts in their fields, they've got day jobs. That's the reality. So I feel so lucky that we've got these incredible people who can really focus on these issues. They understand how to advance the mission of libraries in the legislative realm, in the judicial realm, working through the executive branch, and making sure that the libraries are as strong as they possibly can be in all of these areas. So I think about that when I pay my membership. And I would encourage all of you, if you're a student, get in, be a member right now when it's a little cheaper, but please sustain that membership over the years. It's really, really, really important. I know I said really 3 times.
Really, I'll add forth. The other thing I would think I should mention here, because it feels important, is that, and this is folksy and Midwestern, but my dad always used to say that the world's orchestra needs all its instruments. We need ALA to be ALA and to have those very strategic and massive relationships at a national and international and intersectional scale. Some of our partners that are in the same space can be more agile. They can kind of mic drop more often than we can and be pithy where we can't, because we can't afford to do that because what is at stake with some of the larger relationships that we have. But being pithy and dropping the mic and getting people's attention and having some rapid responses, even if they don't manifest into specific movements that ALA is trying to manifest, is important because, again, we're trying to make the American public aware of what we need their voices to be talking about. And so I would honor the fact that I'm really glad that we've diversified our library portfolio, but I think without the foundational infrastructure of ALA, none of them really exist as robustly or as successfully as they could. So this is why I have memberships to all of the above whenever possible, because they're super important.
Tied in with this, we do have 2 questions that relate to the specific topic of the war in Palestine. And the askers are concerned that ALA has not made statements opposing the war in Palestine and destruction of libraries there. Would you be able to comment on that?
Yeah, I'm going to be folksy again, and it's not because I don't take it seriously, but it's because of the way my brain works. So it's an important matter, and I feel frustrated myself that ALA cannot tackle matters that are of importance to all of us. One of our core values is public good, but right now 2 of our other core values, sustainability, intellectual freedom, and privacy, are getting pummeled. And if we all acknowledged a couple questions ago that the world is watching us and relies on us to hold steady so that they can be holding steady, in this moment in time, I think about that phrase, the hunter who chases 2 foxes catches neither. ALA is the only national network that focuses on libraries. And so right now I really need to hyper-focus on pernicious executive orders that are dismantling the only institution that is focused on museums and libraries. I need to be supporting members who are dealing with tariffs and wondering how that's going to affect printing. I'm dealing with communities who really need to understand why their patrons' consumer rights are not at the table in terms of ebook publishing and what libraries are paying to make those available to our communities. I really need us to hyper-focus on libraries so that they will hear our voice when we all come together and say we've shown up for them, keep them intact, robustly resource them. Because that's the only path back to us being able to talk about public good and have a voice there. We have to keep the store open for our patrons, for our library workers, for our communities, and for our future public good. And so I'm frustrated all the time. But for me, it's really important that this one network that we have hyper-focused, because I think the future of the profession and what we accomplish for our communities, students, academics, public, is too essential, and it's at a crisis moment. I hope that honors your question.
It does. There's another topic that's in the news a lot lately that was asked by one of the attendees. They're asking, what do library trustees need to do differently to address the onslaught of AI in their library and community?
Right, so the Iowa City Public Library borrowed a lot from the American Library Association. We have like a privacy page because we think it's really important for our patrons to understand all the third-party platforms that we have chosen and vetted, and how important and prominent privacy and patron record retention is to us when we have any outside partners. We want to be fully transparent with the library records that we have, but we also want to be fully transparent about any sort of like vulnerabilities or outside, possibilities that we possibly can. And so we're sort of looking to work that the American Library Association is doing to try to figure out how we're going to form that in terms of artificial intelligence. And I think becoming aware, holding conversations, and seeing it through a privacy and intellectual freedom context is important, but then I would gently remind us again, a core value is sustainability, and we know that this comes at a climate cost. So I think one of the best things that you can do is use the United for Libraries toolkit for Board of Trustees members, and try your best to make sure that we're all having an educated conversation about this, and that this is coming up in our board meetings and is always kind of on the agenda. Additionally, we don't typically, at least in the public library space, get to handpick our board members, which is good. We should have board members that reflect the community, but I think signaling that this is going to be an important part of their work on top of the intellectual freedom and the resourcing and the budgeting is really essential to tipping off candidates what we really need from them, and maybe sparking interest of somebody who definitely has knowledge and words in this space.
I appreciate you mentioning United for Libraries there too, which is a division of ALA and really is focused on the needs of trustees, of those board members of public libraries. And I will give a shout out to I know some of our state library agencies actually cover the cost of membership for their entire state. I know here in Maryland that's the case, so that if you need to access those resources, if you live in Maryland, you can access those through ALA Connect, and there's a method to go in and access those resources, but it is free to you in certain states. I believe there might be a dozen, roughly, who have access to that. But even if you don't live in a state that has free access to those United for Libraries resources, it's well worth it. There's lots of training on really how to be the best trustee you can be. I think one of the last questions we'll have here, and then we'll see if we have a couple minutes at the end for anyone else. But again, I want to appreciate everything you do, Sam. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask for your advice about how people can get involved in library advocacy if they have not been involved at any point in their lives. How can they start to get engaged?
Great question. I always say that the easiest and fastest and most ready way to advocate for your library is to use it. I don't want anybody to take my word for it. Come in and see for yourself what's going on between the stacks and what's happening in story time. I invite everybody with every conversation, crossing and spanning the political spectrum, to come in and visit their library and get a library card today. Iowa is an open access state. We have 544 libraries. I have 130 cards. I don't use them all. but I think it's useful to know what's going on in your libraries. But additionally, if you want to get involved, being on the board of a public library is like one of the most accessible forms of accessing government and leadership that we have in the United States. It's pretty incredible that you can have a position of leadership in your community that benefits public good and really touches and tickles everybody in your community if they apply themselves to library services. It's quite powerful and profound. On a professional lane, I think that sitting in on your next state chapter board meeting, which are open, would be kind of a fascinating way to learn what's going on, what they're focusing on, and the trends and the impacts that they're dealing with in your area. But additionally, the American Library Association board meetings are open as well, and I'd absolutely love to have you join us and submit questions to us. We have email and be involved because we inform each other and we edify each other when we do this good work together. We're stronger together. And it's always human beings sitting in those positions of power, and you could be one of those human beings too. And so I would suggest that you listen in and connect yourself with folks, because even if you're like, the board member life, the presidency life is not for me, they're still serving you. I'm here to serve you. That's why I'm here. And then lastly, I think maybe seeing if you or a couple of friends could hit up a committee meeting and just sort of see what's going on either on Zoom or in person is super powerful. I'm rallying a lot of our retired faction who already have their IPers in Iowa and can safely go tell truth to power. And then just increasingly asking folks to build their networks is really important, because not all of the library conversations are going to happen in our network and our spheres, friends. In fact, the most important ones are going to happen at the Interfaith Alliance, and they're going to happen at like the council forum that nobody wants to go to at 8:30 on a Saturday morning. Those are where library stories need to be told, right? And the intersectionality of whatever is being focused on and is the primary goal in this space, and how the library can help them accomplish that, is met.
Thank you, Sam.